This episode of Liquid Assets is sponsored by HASA, the leader in water treatment solutions. HASA delivers eco-friendly, reliable, and cost-effective water care and has been keeping communities safe, one drop at a time. They've been at it for more than 60 years, and you can learn more about HASA by visiting hasa.com. That's HASA, HASA.com. Welcome to Liquid Assets, a podcast about water through the lens of policy, business, and technology. I'm your host, Ravi Kurani. Today we have an awesome guest for you. We have Dhwani Bhatt calling us from Boston. Dhwani, how are you doing today?
Hi, my name is Dhwani Bhatt, and I'm a fourth-year chemical engineering major. Today on this Liquid Assets podcast, you will be hearing from me about my work with Engineers Without Borders, specifically building a water distribution system in rural Uganda.
Let's go ahead and jump right into it. You were talking about Uganda, and there was one point that you mentioned before we hit record, and that was around charity projects. You see a lot of charity projects being done around the world. Talk to us about that. I think you had a few really interesting points that you wanted to drive home. Yeah, let's open up with that.
Yeah, so just for a bit of context, I actually grew up in Uganda my whole life. I'm Indian, but my parents worked there, so grew up in Uganda. It's a beautiful country, but underdeveloped country, and there's a lot of poverty, a lot of water, energy, food insecurity. So this is something I grew up seeing all around me at all times. So due to that, there was a lot of charity projects that I grew up with, right? Like through school, we would just have so many charity clubs that we could be part of. And it always came to my mind, like, what makes a charity project actually impactful? What makes it good and important? And how do you make sure that, when you're doing charity, when you're implementing a project, you're not like doing more harm and taking away from the community and their values. So this was something that was always really close to my heart, is charity work and how to do it the right way. Coming to college, I joined this club called the Engineers Without Borders. So it is an organization, EWB USA is a national organization that has many student chapters around the country. So Northeastern particularly has a chapter. And coincidentally, they also had a project in Uganda. So this was like technically like charity work, right? Like we're going for free as students, raising funds to do projects in different parts of the world. Specifically for Northeastern University, we had a water project in Uganda. So immediately I joined. I was like, this is my home country. I want to give back. What's a better way to do that than through my major, where I can learn and grow as an engineer, but impact my home country. And Engineers Without Borders has really answered all my questions of what makes charity, or what, at least for me, charity means and how to make it impactful. And I struggle to even call it charity work because, it sort of has this connotation that we're just kind of going and dropping a project and leaving. And that's kind of sort of what people think charity is. Like you give something and you don't really stick around. Like that's how, at least I grew up seeing charity and how charity was being done. But the unique approach that Engineers Without Borders take is that we view this work as a long-term collaboration. We focus on not only investing into resources to build our projects, but into capacity building of the community, helping them understand their problem better through different lenses, through our knowledge. Sitting down with the community and asking them what they need, not going in with what I think they need, right? And I think that's typically where we see this kind of nuance with charity work is these organizations that have great knowledge, great resources, great connections, go into these underprivileged communities thinking they know what they need. But the truth is no one knows it better than the person that needs it. So that is where, I think my work with Engineers Without Borders really stands out because that's the first question we ask when we sit with our communities is, what do you need and what can we do for you? Not, hey, here's what I think you need and here's something great, which I think will work for you.
Walk me through what ended up happening, right? So you had this EWB project that was in Uganda. You looked at it and you're like, hey, I get to basically work back in my home country. And you hit on a really interesting point of you don't go there as, in terms of your definition of charity work, where you just go and drop a project, leave, and then try to force your solution upon the community. You actually listen and talk. And so walk me through what EWB's process is and why is that different from a charity standpoint? How do you interviewing, do you collect that data? Do you talk to people before you even, put pen to paper? What does that look like?
So typically EWB projects are 5 to 7 year, very long-term projects where we pick a community based on their needs. We get partnered with a community and we have different phases of how we proceed with our project. So the very first like travel that we do to our countries, specifically like I'll talk about in the context of Uganda, is we do an assessment trip where literally we're going there with nothing. We're just going there to build relationships with the community, understand their problem from them, not through any research we're doing online, not through what we think we know, but talk to them, understand. So these assessment trips include, doing assessment of the land. So if we're doing a water project, you need hydrogeological surveys. You need to understand like the elevation maps. So collecting all that data in person, talking to the community. So building a water board, for example. So our project, we built a water board that consists of local district officials, leaders in the community, where we're basically creating this community that is going to be responsible for this project moving forward. After this initial assessment phase, we go back to the drawing board and we say, here's what we know they need and what we know they have and what we know they want. Now, what can we do? Where can we
So,
go?
kind of in
Yes, yes.
context of your particular Uganda project, what were you actually going out there to do?
Yes. So this project began back in 2017, before I was even a part of this club, but it was to build a water distribution system for a rural village in Uganda called Nakyenyi. Where there are about like 4,000 residents there. They don't have any access to fresh water sourced from the city supply because the infrastructure just doesn't reach that far. So majority of the population there rely on open sources. So this is just rivers, lakes that are contaminated with E. coli, and it's just not safe to drink. So we were basically going there to build a water distribution system for the whole village.
Got it. And you you figured this out after you went there and did the assessment. So you spoke to the folks at
Yes,
in what was the
in
village's name again?
Nacheni.
In
Yeah.
in Nacheni, and
Yes.
they said that the rivers and streams are polluted with E. coli or with some, maybe they know the disease, maybe they don't. And you would basically survey that and then say, hey, look, I think the solution, or you think the solution is
Yeah.
that we need to build kind of a water distribution system here.
Yeah. So we actually went there and we spoke with families. We went into their households, asked them, how much water do you use? How much do you use for your farm? How much do you use to cook? Do you boil it beforehand? And then understanding based on what families do what, where they get their water from, seeing the health issues associated to that, seeing how often their children get sick, seeing how many hours that, the girls in the household spend walking miles away to get water for the house every day, right? So we actually speak to the family members and understand this. We surveyed over 50 households in the community, and we then walked with them to their water sources and collected water samples to do tests on them, turbidity measurements, pH measurements, and compare them with national standards. And a lot of these water sources, unfortunately, did not meet these standards. But they have no other option. That's how they drink their water. That's how they survive. So, and that's how we found that out through the assessment trip.
And I remember on the impact work I did many years ago, women and girls walking to collect water just is a decrease on their total time that's available, right? They can't study, they can't go to school, and it's a big problem, especially on top of the water actually just being dirty, right? So they're
Exactly.
spending all this time and they're getting dirty water.
Yeah, yeah. Water scarcity is actually, it prohibits access to education, economic growth because people can't focus on their businesses, can't keep it efficient, have to spend so much time and energy into collecting water, going to hospitals, spending time sick. So this is just not an issue about, just drinking clean water. It's so much more than that that affects the community and the country at large.
And so you surveyed the population in Cheney. Um, how big is this village and how much water did they need? And the next question I'm going to ask actually is, what happens then? Did you start building this water distribution system? What did that look like? Did you install pumps? Like, walk me through that.
Yes, yes, of course. So this is where it's really interesting. So yeah, based on the data we collected from how much water we need, or how much water the household needs, and each household needs, and scaling that up, we figured out an appropriate size for a borehole that we could dig. So a borehole is basically a vertical shaft into the ground. It's very like narrow. You use a drilling rig to dig it. It's not really a well. People typically associate it with a well, but it goes much deeper, like 100 to 300 meters deep. So we had to conduct a hydrogeological survey to figure out, this tells you where the aquifers are, what land is best to drill the borehole into. And then phase one of our project was to just drill the borehole and install a hand pump. So that just gave the community very temporary access to clean water. And we obviously did this. So we do how EWB works is because we're abroad, we do all the design work while we're away, and then we travel to implement these projects. So we meet with the contractors, we have our designs approved all virtually, remotely, and then come on ground to implement it. So that was phase one of our project. And then, so that gave them access to a hand pump, right? However, this still doesn't get rid of the issue that, children are being sent to like use the hand pump. It's time consuming. It's not the safest. There's a lot of maintenance costs associated with it because it's a manual pump, so it breaks. So that was an issue there. So then the next phase of our project, phase two, which is when I actually got to travel back home again with my EWB team, was to develop this hand pump and scale it up from a hand pump to a solar powered pump. So to add a solar array and a solar powered pump, which would be able to then pump the water automatically into a tank. So then it can just be refilled with a tap. So that increases time and then decreases the need for operations and maintenance costs. So this is where it actually starts going downhill, because after we traveled and came back, we successfully implemented, the solar power pump, solar array. And what we did initially was when we scaled the amount of water that the community needed, we actually dug a borehole with capacity that was a lot more than that. Because what we wanted to do was actually distribute this throughout the whole village, not just the small community around the borehole. Because if it was just a borehole, then only the people who live close to it and can walk there will come and get the water. So phase three of our project was supposed to be scaling this solar powered pump and actually making a distribution system. So having pipes that, pump all this water from the solar powered pump up to a hill, a tank on a hill, and then through a gravity fed system, go downhill and supply 3 to 4 different locations around the village. So that way more people have access to it. It has a wide reachability. However, this is where, I encountered my first real challenge as an engineer, was we found out that our borehole siltation was occurring in it. So what a borehole is, as I explained, is like a vertical shaft in the ground it has like PVC casing that's like packed with gravel in the middle to filter the water as it comes in. In this PVC casing, at various points where there's aquifers located, so water sources underground, you add what's called like screens. So it's just like these micro holes in the PVC pipes to allow the water to go into the borehole, and that's how it's pumped out. So siltation occurs when actually the force from the soil around kind of pushes the PVC pipes in the screen so hard that it just breaks it, and then silts, so like small particles start accumulating in the water. So we learned this, and based on our calculations and estimations, learned that even with the siltation, our pump could still last for another 2 years, right? So this is where we had to sit back to the drawing board. Like, hey, the community can have water for 2 years that will be clean. We know there's still building up at the bottom, but it's going to be fine for 2 years. But then we asked ourselves, no, like they will always need water, not just for 2 years. We can't just do this and walk away. It could have been so easy to just build it, have a successful EWB Northeastern project, and leave, right? But we went back to the drawing board and we said that's not right. So that meant us, like reevaluating all the resources we put into digging this particular borehole. We actually sent a team out to try and flush it, to try and fix it, but realized it was not a problem that was solvable in that particular borehole. And we had to reevaluate the whole situation and say, okay, this is a short-term cost we're going to pay for a long-term benefit. And we went back to the drawing board and said, hey, I think we need to drill another borehole and figure out what we're going to do with these solar panels and this pump that we've invested in. Are we going to put it in another borehole in the community that's broken? So try and problem solve with what we have, but again, keep the community at heart. Because for us, what would have been easier is to, build everything, build the distribution system and walk away. But we made sure that was not our decision. And I think that's where our values as engineers without borders comes into play, because the community is at heart. And throughout all of this, one thing we made sure was transparency with our communities. They knew about every single thing happening. They knew about the siltation. They knew about the, flushing of the borehole to try and fix the siltation. And they knew when we found out that we could not fix that borehole. I think I went on a little tangent there, but I think
No, that's super impressive, and I think it's important to understand that you were able to kind of go back to the drawing board and rewind the issue that you faced with this borehole and the siltation, and then actually either drill a new borehole or figure out how to actually solve it. And that's super impressive. What was it like going back home and doing this project kind of in your home country?
It was emotional to say the least. I grew up knowing that, there was a lot of severe poverty in Uganda. I obviously lived a very privileged life that I'm very grateful for. Growing up there, I had access to good food, good water, energy supply, but I knew these things were not like that wasn't the case like two houses down, right? But going back, it really hit because this time I came in as someone who was resourceful and could help and could do something. And that was quite nuanced, right? It felt like really great being able to give back to my community, but it also felt like this nuanced position of power that I was put into that I didn't really necessarily enjoy or know how to deal with this at first because imposter syndrome kicked in, right? Like the truth is I was really just a student in my second year of college who barely, I don't even have an engineering degree, but here I am presenting designs to community members who are obviously, they're in a place of need. So they're hopeful. So they're just going to believe what, we bring to the table. So it raised a lot of questions for me of like, is this work like, is this okay? Like, is it okay for me to come in and do this? But then I had to remind myself of all the values and all the steps and processes that we went through to get to that point. And to come to terms with me being okay with being in that slight position of power in a way in the community and always reminding myself that I'm here for them. I'm not here to implement and force something on them. If they say they're not comfortable with something, I'm going to listen. So I went in as a listener, I went in as a learner as opposed to a someone who was trying to like force something onto them. But the experience meant a lot. Yeah.
If you were to distill how you tried processing that or ended up processing that, what would you boil that down to?
Like processing like the nuance of it. I think I realized that we all have something to contribute. True impact is when we can, like all individuals from different positions of power, knowledge, background, can come to the table and bring what they have to contribute without thinking you're better or worse than the other, right? When we sat with the water board, there was so much valuable information that they had for us about the families and the kind of land that we could build a borehole on because we can't just go and drop something there, right? We need their permission. So truly listening and never thinking that you know more than the person you're sitting across with, no matter what your background is, what your knowledge is. So I think it boiled down to me understanding that we're all here to learn and we're just trying to put what we have together to build something for all of us. This water project was not just for the community, it was a big part of me and my college life too, right? Like them getting water, their borehole working meant a lot to me too. So I think it boiled down to kind of that selflessness of just wanting to learn and grow together.
I want to circle back to kind of how we opened up this podcast of charity work. You mentioned that there's kind of this commonality or this idea in charity work where somebody will go in and just drop the project and leave. What examples have you seen of that in Uganda, or even just in your work in general? It doesn't have to even be in Uganda. Just so the audience can kind of get the black and white between what EWB is doing and examples of charity projects that.
I actually have a great example of this. It's actually to do with water in the community of Nakyenyi, so I can make a direct comparison. While we were in the community surveying everyone, walking around their water sources, every water source we'd walk past, there would be a borehole that we'd walk past and ignore. And, we'd ask the community, hey, there's a borehole here. Why don't you use it? And then we'd walk up to it and they'd show us something broke or, they don't know how to fix a part or the metal rusted. And it was really sad to see this because, under this borehole, it's like these large advertisements of like who built the borehole when, like just a year ago, perhaps this big like NGO came in and like built a borehole. Where are they now? Who can we contact if this borehole's broken? Did you train the community? Did you show them what this borehole means, how to fix it? Did you make them feel like it's a part of their, like they're responsible for it? Did you help them build like a financial model system to like be able to have the funds to fix it when they need it after you leave, right? These are all things that EWB does. We work with the community to build a financial model, to do operations and maintenance training over 5 to 7 years, right? So by the time we leave, the community is 100% responsible and has the resources and the knowledge they need to work with what we just gave them. So this is a typical example of those organizations did a great work, right? They came, they built a borehole. It worked well for a year, 2 years. what after that? That was a waste of resources. That was a waste of so much time and energy. So that's what I mean by, charity work not really being treated like we really need to understand the difference between capacity building and then just building something and dropping it and leaving. Because at the end of the day, the communities, it matters most for them, right? Like,
When you say capacity building, I remember this was a problem even in the impact work I was doing many years ago, of this concept of kind of training the trainers, right? Which you just mentioned right now. Of if you just go in and leave and nobody knows how to repair a part or how to fix something or how to operate it, how do you and how does EWB create those SOPs or those training materials and then pass that information along, but then more importantly make sure that the information actually is accepted, received, and digested so that the community is also self-reliant on this project that you've deployed?
yeah. So that's something that's actually a work in progress every time, right? We can never get it fully right. So we're always willing to adapt our process. But throughout my time as the project lead and as president of Engineers Without Borders at Northeastern, one thing that I worked with is just the water board, right? And talking to them. Every like 3 weeks or so, we just talk to them. Even if we have no project updates, just talking to them. Because I think, especially in Uganda, it's a very cultural thing, trust and social relationships. And when they trust you and when they really see you as a part of their community, they're going to listen and they're going to be willing to, make changes to certain things that they do and like, be open to conversations. For example, just an example, what EWB is unique for is we have this thing called 5% contribution costs, where the community contributes 5% of, the total cost for building this project. Now, initially it may come off as like, oh, are they paying us back 5%? No, it's totally not like that. This 5% contribution cost doesn't solely have to be in terms of money. It can be in terms of resources. It can be in terms of like, like engineers in the community provide labor work, to build the project. And what this does is it psychologically creates a sense of responsibility towards this borehole, towards the system. So the next time, something breaks, like the community members care about it. So that's something by working with them inherently from day one, we create that sense of responsibility where they feel like it's their project too. They're not just expecting to sit back and just get something working. So that's one thing. And specifically to elaborate more on the contribution costs. So what I talked about, building this trust in these relationships to enable the community to be more open to these changes and like hard conversations is when we were working with our community in Nakyenyi to how we treated the contribution cost was we wanted the community to start their own bank account and have some funds in store and raise funds every month themselves in the community to be able to access to maintain the system if it ever breaks. So what we proposed for that is that each household, based on the ratio of how much water they use, contributes some amount of money that was like very reasonable. And again, it wasn't like forced, like, oh, you get no water if you don't pay, but sort of like an open contribution to this bank account. And there was a lot of challenges there, right? Like some households did not want to pay, some community leaders did not want to collect money from their community members. But this is something that over time, like over the course of a year, just by talking to them and explaining where we were coming from and why we wanted them to have this money just for themselves. We had nothing to do with bank account. Like building this relationship with them and just by talking and like showing up every 3 weeks and saying, hey, like we're still working on this. How are you doing? That trust, I just saw this transition over a year where they all of a sudden were very willing to, collect these payments and they opened a bank account. So I think it all comes down to showing up and like being there for the community and like building that trust and those connections.
I want to pivot to the life of Dhwani. I feel like entrepreneurs and folks that we have on the podcast, it's just really interesting to see your background and kind of where you came from. We obviously you mentioned earlier that you're from Uganda, but you're studying in Boston. Kind of walk us through your storyline. Like what outside of EWB, what are you working on? Like what drives you?
Yeah. Great question. So I've always been a very curious mind. I could never sit still. I always just wanted to do like so many things. What drives me is social impact. I'm gonna be able to with every little thing that I do, whether it's seeing a smile on like one person's face or seeing a whole community get access to water. I want my work to have impact. And that's one thing I knew from a very young age I wanted my work to have. So when I was applying to colleges, I looked at a bunch of different programs didn't really know what I wanted to do. Like I was good at math, physics, like I enjoyed learning, right? But one thing I always ask myself is how can I have an impact, right? And I saw engineering as a way to go through so many different industries in need and be able to have that impact while challenging myself and being innovative and being able to just create things for myself. So I particularly liked the education system in the US because it was so open-ended. You could do internships and you know there wasn't a strict path to follow. Even just as a chemical engineer, I have kind of crafted my path through college. I've done so many like different research projects in different research labs. I've done like 3 study abroad experiences in the field of chemical engineering. So I really loved this kind of open approach to learning that the colleges in the US had, specifically Northeastern University, because we actually have a co op program. We're one of the best in the nation for our co op program, where every 6 months we do a rotation where we take classes and then we work for a company full time, like do an internship. So just through this, I've been exposed to different companies. I'm currently doing my second co-op in aluminum waste recycling. My last co-op was waste mining wastewater remediation at a company called Siltation. So I've been able to be exposed to so many different industries. And again, the common thread that I see through all the work that I've done, whether it's research or my co-op or an internship, a study abroad experience, is I want to learn so that I can have an impact, right? I want my work to be able, I want to show my work and say, this had X impact on these people, this company, this industry. So, yeah, that's kind of like sort of how I came to Boston. And then since I've been here, I've just worked on like a million different things, and EWB has been one of the ones that's been closest to my heart. But I'm excited to grow more, learn more, and continue exploring more fields, just all the while having the most impact I can.
So it's the end of 2025 right now. You graduate in 2027. What does Dhwani do after? What are you going to do
After I graduate or before?
after you graduate?
After I graduate. Okay. So it's very up in the air right now. But I think if I was to say a few like big dreams of mine that just come to mind when you ask that question, is I really want to do some sort of like fellowship that encapsulates business and entrepreneurship with engineering, because I want to keep a foot in my technical background. But I think to have great impact in the world, you have to have this sort of business approach, entrepreneurial mind. So I kind of want to go that route. There's a couple fellowships that come to mind for that in the US and outside. So yeah, I think stepping a little bit away from the technical and learning how to implement large scale through business, econ, I think that's what stands out to me right now. And then overall large scale, I think the goal is to eventually go back to Uganda one day, whether that's starting my own company or joining another company that I really resonate with, like perhaps Engineers Without Borders itself. Like they do have an East Africa office, so we'll see. But I think the goal is to go back home because that's where my heart is, and I think there's a lot to be done there, a lot of growth and a lot of need there.
Awesome. It's amazing. If you have any advice or suggestions for folks that are just entering college, or I guess I can't ask you the question of what happens after college because you're not there yet. But what would you suggest for new and incoming students?
There's so much for you to do, and try everything. Be a yes man for the first year, for the second year. It's going to be tiring, but by saying yes to everything, you're going to learn what you like and what you don't like. Reach out to folks, network. There's so much out there for you to learn and to grow from and to have an impact with that you don't even know you can do yet. Looking back in just the last 3 years of my college experience, I can't even fathom how much I've been able to do. I would laugh at you if you told me I would do all this, even last year. Don't compare yourself to the average person. There is no such thing. Just do what you need to do and let that fire burn. Reach out to people, ask for help, and really try everything until you find that one thing that you will know when your heart is satisfied and you truly love what you want to do. But you first have to obviously go through so many phases where you don't love what you do. So just try everything, say yes, reach out, and network. I think that's the advice I would
Love that. I ask everybody this question as our final question on the pod, and that is, do you have a book, a TV show, or a movie that has just profoundly changed the way that you look at the world so far?
Actually, recently I read this book called Not the End of the World by Hannah Ritchie, How We Can Be the First Generation to Build a Sustainable Future. I've been kind of at a point in my career where I've worked so much in the field of sustainability. It's almost kind of taken a toll on me in a way where, being an engineer means being a problem solver, which means you have to encounter so many problems. So I was getting to a point where I was encountering so many problems in the world, like plastic pollution, water pollution, food waste, waste management, where I felt a bit overwhelmed and a bit helpless, like I couldn't really do anything. And I was struggling to get the grand picture of like what sustainability means, where the world is progressing. Because all the news you hear is like, oh, climate change, you know, and all these detrimental effects on our world today. But this book really put it things in gave me a really fresh perspective and has kind of like recharged my passion to work in the industry of sustainability. Hannah Ritchie is a researcher in Our World Data Center, and she runs through all the numbers and proves so many common misconceptions the average person has about sustainability and where our world is heading. And I think she zooms out a lot and gives a lot of great insight into all these very diverse topics that we all talk and think about, but don't really know where to seek the data from. So it's a very factual book. It's greatly written and personally challenged a lot of the misconceptions I had. So I highly, highly recommend it to anyone who even slightly cares about the world and, sustainability and building a better world for tomorrow.
Amazing. Awesome. We'll throw that on the show notes.
Yeah.
Devon, thanks a ton for joining us. This has been absolutely insightful, and I love the work you're doing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time out for me.